How's it going, folks? I'm Matthew, this is Lemora's Cards, and today we're going to be breaking down how and why you should play Tymna Kraum, otherwise known as Blue Farm, in cEDH in 2024. I had my Learn to Play series. It kind of take a lot of editing time, and uploading 3 videos a week like I've been doing, it's kind of hard to do. That old formatting was also kind of prone to getting outdated quickly, so what I would like to do is kind of go through decks as they are now, in a format that's a little bit easier to update, and also that is a bit more complete. We didn't really show the full deck list in those, so we're gonna highlight the deck a bit more, give you the simplest information up front, dive deeper and deeper into the deck list as we go on. You can just get the basics and leave, just figure out, a little bit about the format. That's fine too. If you enjoyed this video, consider liking, commenting, subscribing. Let me know down below if you like this series, if you'd like to see more of it, and if so, which deck you would like to see next. And thank you, as always, to my amazing patrons over on Patreon who get access to early videos. Will absolutely be the first people I listen to in terms of which deck I should cover next in a series like this. Also get to submit questions for the podcast as well as decks to showcase in the tournament reports. With all that being said, let's hop into it. Use my link in the description below to download and sign up for Whatnot and get $15 on your account. Purchase Magic singles, sealed product, take place in live stream auctions, or grab anything else you want on the app. I'm sure you're gonna find something you like, and you get $15 just for signing up. Also, you can get 10% off into the AM apparel down below as well. Get yourself some of these really cool shirt designs that they have. Their shirts are super comfortable, very soft, and they have super awesome designs. Tymna Kraum, also known as Blue Farm, is currently the most popular deck, as well as arguably the best deck in cEDH at the moment. It has easily some of the best numbers out of any deck currently, despite being incredibly popular. Has a very high conversion rate, does incredibly well at tournaments. Never a surprise to see this top 16, top 4, or win an event. So what is this deck? Tymna Kraum is a 4-color sands green mid-range ad nauseum list. That ad nauseum part is not quite as important nowadays, but it's still relevant. It looks to utilize running the best cards in the format, as well as having access to 2 advantage engines in the command zone and lots of advantage engines in the 98 to just overpower the table with sheer card quality and card quantity. Tymna Kraum is most well known for its raw ability to just have all the good cards in its hand. You can use the commanders as a fallback, Tymna providing kind of slow advantage but can be bursty on certain board states, and Kraum providing very inevitable card advantage. Kraum can easily draw you 3 cards a turn without any other development. Just getting down an early Kraum can be very powerful, and then you also get access to a lot of the best cards in the format. We're running Dockside, Underworld Breach, Thassa's Oracle, Rhystic Study, Mystic Remora. Very powerful stuff, and all the best colors, all the best cards. One of the main strengths of this deck is that it is incredibly versatile. So we're going to be looking at Freedom Waffle's list. I think this is a pretty good example of the current top tier builds of Tymna Kraum. There are some card slots that swap even between the most optimized lists, and we'll cover those. But I think this is a good starting point for what you should be looking at for your Tymna Kraum list if you want to play the deck. So the main Wincons that we have access to with this deck are Thassa's Oracle, which if we have an empty library wins us the game, in combination with Demonic Consultation, which we can use to just name a card that's not in our library, exile our entire library, win the game with Thassa's Oracle trigger, as well as Tainted Pact, which is a little bit better but a little bit more expensive. Both of these are A+B wins with Thassa's Oracle. Cast Thassa's Oracle, hold priority, cast either of these, win the game. Our other main Wincon is arguably even better, and that's Underworld Breach. Underworld Breach lets us recast cards from our graveyard by exiling 3 cards in addition to paying its cost. This in combination with Lion's Eye Diamond, which we can discard our hand, add 3 mana of any color with, and Brain Freeze allows us to cast Underworld Breach, Brain Freeze ourselves, mill a whole bunch of cards, escape Lion's Eye Diamond, get more mana, escape Brain Freeze, get more cards, and we'll easily be able to keep up with cards. We'll mill at an extremely fast rate so that we can cast anything we want. We can either mill ourselves out and then cast Thassa's Oracle with a empty library, or we can mill out our opponents, force them to draw, or just pass the turn. This also forms a bit of a combo with Intuition. Cast Intuition, search our library for Underworld Breach, Lion's Eye Diamond, and Sevinne's Reclamation. We can then flashback Sevinne's Reclamation, bringing back Lion's Eye Diamond and Underworld Breach, recast the Intuition from our graveyard, and then get Brain Freeze and anything else we need, and win from there. Mnemonic Betrayal is also something of a 1-card Wincon. If your opponents have any amount of cards in their graveyard, some tutors, some rituals, this thing often just wins the game. Ad Nauseam is another card you can look at as a 1-card Wincon. It's not usually at its best in Tymna Kraum, but one thing that we're good at is developing developing lots of things to the board, drawing lots of cards, so that our ad nauseum, we might do it on an end step, and we don't need as many cards as some other decks might, right? We might be okay with an ad nauseum that gets us 10 cards because we don't need too many cards to be able to put a win together. This isn't really a main phase Nas deck. Most of the time, you're not wanting to turbo it out unless you get a really good feeling that now is your window. Typically, you just want to hold up the Nas, have it as an option, use it on an end step in response to a win attempt, something like that, where you're thinking it's very likely to resolve. In the enchantment slot, we have Mystic Grimoire and Rhystic Study, arguably like the most pivotal cards in the format currently. Getting down one of these along with Esper Sentinel, that is primary game plan number one. This is one of the best things you can do in this format, is sitting behind these powerful draw engines that punish your opponents, let you draw lots of cards as the game goes on, play the good guy, interact with the faster decks of the table, get yourself in a position where you're just unbeatable, and then win. Esper Sentinel, one of the best advantage engines in the game. Ragavan, also a very powerful advantage engine, mainly in the early game. Fantastic with Tymna. Dockside Extortionist, arguably the most powerful card in the format. Drannith Magistrate is one of the few cards here that isn't really proactively good. That can kind of just shut people down. One of the main strengths of it is that it is still a pretty good Tymna attacker. Grand Abolisher and Ranger Captain are both here for very similar purposes. They are incredibly good at breaking through long games. One of the main strengths of this deck is being able to draw more cards than the rest of the table and then slam down a Grand Abolisher, a Ranger Captain of Eos, or Silence to break through that sort of mid-range slog that a lot of games can get into with an effect that's very hard to deal with. These cards are also the main reason that you see Cavern of Souls in some Tymna Kraum decks, although it's not in this one currently. On top of working with Esper Sentinel, Opposition Agent, Drannith Magistrate, and Tymna, having an uncounterable Grand Abolisher is pretty close to unbeatable. Lotho is another powerful thing to get down in the early game to get us access to mana advantage. Orcish Bowmasters, if you've played cEDH, you know how good this card is. There's lots of card draw in the format. Being able to just take over a board where someone else is getting too much advantage, especially in Tymna Kraum mirrors, where you can ping down somebody's Tymna, reduce their ability to draw or punish them for doing so. Pinging down hate bears or advantage engines like Esper Sentinel, or just having lots of pressure on life totals on the board. Also has fantastic synergy with any of the wheel effect. Play this, wheel, wipe the board, have a 22-22 or going at somebody's face. Phantasmal Image and Phyrexian Metamorph are both very popular in the metagame currently. There are so many powerful creatures, like we mentioned with Dockside Extortionists, Orcish Bowmasters, plus all the commanders that you see in play, that these have just become main deckable for most lists. Phyrexian Metamorph gets the added advantage of being able to copy the One Ring, which some Tymna Kraum decks aren't on, but if you can get one for 3 mana when it's the best thing on the board, pretty nice deal. Very flexible cards. Opposition Agent is kind of generically good. A lot of times we want to hold up mana if we're not doing a super proactive plan in the early game. Get somebody who does the first shooter, can be really strong start to your game. And then Simian Spirit Guide is just access to easy mana. It, along with Rite of Flame, are both not like the most powerful cards, especially Rite of Flame, because casting spells is such a disadvantage at times in this metagame. But they are really good at making your ad nauseum better. A lot of times the main thing you need to be able to do after ad nauseum is just be able to get that Dockside out. If you can nause into Rite of Flame and then Dockside, you're probably golden. That's probably a win. You have a lot of generically good tutors. You'll tend to see one powerful thing with Underworld Breach is that Demonic Tutor and Gamble both tend to be just 1-card Wincons with it. If you have any decent sized graveyard at all, you can tutor for Breach. And then especially with Gamble, you just have to dodge discarding the Breach. Cast the Breach, recast the tutor, put together the combo. Toxic Deluge, you usually see about 1 board wipe in Tymna Kraum. It can be really helpful against decks like Kinnan or Sisay that can really take over the board in a way that's hard to interact with, especially with our removal mostly being single target removal. And you tend to see the 1 Wheel of Fortune, because this is another thing that we can use this with Lion's Eye Diamond and Underworld Breach to keep wheeling until we can find a way to win, which is especially powerful if behind one of our silence effects. Tymna Kraum, being mainly a mid-range deck that has the flexibility of winning early, tends to run a lot of interaction because that's the way that we get to stay alive into those late games. We have to be able to make sure we make it there, and then we also want to be able to protect our wins. The interaction you'll pretty well see in every single TNK list is Flusterstorm, Mental Misstep, the 2 Pyroblast, Silence, opponents can't cast spells, Swan Song, Swords to Plowshares, Snap, Deflecting Swat, Fierce Guardianship, Force of Negation, Mindbreak Trap, and Force of Will. These pretty well are in every deck. Cards like Dispel will come in and out. You might see a miscast or offer you can't refuse in these slots instead. But for the most part, it's that main package, and then there's 1 or 2 extras. Chain of Vapor is a great way to deal with a problem permanent immediately, as well as a fantastic way to make a whole bunch of mana using your mana rocks. You get to bounce them, sack land, bounce them, sack land. It gets even better if you're using Underworld Breach, because you get a lot of cards in your graveyard. We run a lot of tutors because we have a great selection of cards that we need access to. Sometimes a weakness of this deck can be you just don't draw the right thing when you need it. So having access to cards like Enlightened Tutor, Mystical Tutor, Vampiric Tutor, very, very helpful. A new card that doesn't have a specific use in this deck unless you're running Necropotence, which not a lot of Tymna Kraum decks do, is Born Upon a Wind. This, along with Final Fortune, are incredibly powerful at taking advantage of the draw power that you have on other players' turns, finding a window where you feel it's ideal for you to win, and then going for your win there. That's a lot of what the Tymna Kraum game plan is sitting back, understanding when you can safely win, and taking advantage of that. This artifact package is pretty set in stone across decks. The one thing you might not see in other lists is Mox Amber. The more legends you're on, the better, but it tends to just be good anyways. And then you very often see this specific package of talisman effects: Arcane Signet, Felwar Stone, Talisman of Progress, sometimes Talisman of Dominant. Smothering Tithe is a card that you see some of the time. It's gotten more popular in Tymna Kraum lately. It's very good in that if you get to resolve this card and untap with it, you probably never have to worry about having enough mana for the rest of the game. I've heard Freedom Waffle has described this card as 4 mana Omniscience. Whenever I've played it, it's also felt that way. Our mana base, pretty typical for cEDH. We have all the duels, all the fetches that we can run, shock lands in the relevant colors. We're running Otawara as a great uncounterable way that also isn't stopped by Granabosh or Ranger Captain to deal with things like Breach combo. Some cards you don't see here that do show up in other high-performing Tymna Kraum decks. Necropotence is one we mentioned. You tend to see either Smothering Tithe or Necropotence, and then a lot of times it's not uncommon if you see Necropotence to see more Stormy-related cards that are more proactive, like Bergie or Jeska's Will. They're not necessary to make that card good. It's just something that you tend to see if players are valuing Necropotence. It's gotten a lot more powerful with the printing of Born Upon a Wind. This card is just so absurd that it's basically its own other 2-card combo. Now we can look at some mulligans. So we have a lot of flexibility when we mulligan. We can look for early win attempt, although typically the decks aren't built for doing that. So unless it just presents itself, I wouldn't mulligan for that. What we really want is early access to some sort of advantage engine, something that's going to get us ahead in the game and keep us there. So an early Esper Sentinel, Rhystic Study, Mystic Remora, Kraum, sometimes Tymna, something like that can get us going. Opposition Agent can also do the trick. So with a hand like this, assuming we're not going first, which we're not that likely to go, we have a Gemstone Caverns that we can exile one of our mini lands to, Vampiric Tutor for Mystic Remora, and then getting a turn 1 fish that has an extra land behind it can be very nice. We know that we're going to still get to untap with 2 mana even after paying for the fish on turn 2, which might let us develop into something that we draw. This isn't the most busted hand in the world, and we don't get to hold up interaction for something like a turn 2 win attempt, although if we do feel like that's coming, we can hold up our Vamp Tutor to look for interaction or some other bit of disruption to prevent somebody from winning. So this is a pretty flexible hand. We would like to see something other than Snap, ideally. We also do have the option to Vampiric Tutor for Jewel Lotus and then cast a Kraum holding up Fierce Guardianship. That might be the better play. That's like probably a good combination of safe and also pushing us forward in terms of resource advancement. So we don't have an amazing turn 1. Again, this is another hand that, depending on what our opponents do and what our turn order, that it's going to change our first play, because we have the option to go turn 1 land Mana Vault Felwar Stone, and if we have access to white, we can go turn 1 Drannith Magistrate, which in some pods can be very powerful. And then if we have access to black, we can go turn 1 Bowmasters, but not at instant speed, which is a little bit awkward, but altogether not too bad still. We also have the ability to go land Mana Vault Pass, and then in our upkeep, we could Mystical Tutor. There's not a lot of great things to Mystical Tutor for. That doesn't line up with doing a turn 2 Naz. It would let us wheel, and we might have enough mana to consider that, but I would probably be either looking to set up for a turn 2 Kraum or go with the turn 1 Drannith plan, depending on the pod. So this is a hand that is definitely bait. There's not really anything going on here. If we make our second land drop, we at least get to play the game, but until then, we're just sitting here with a bunch of red spells we can't cast, Signet we can't do anything with. I think even if this had a second land, there's just not a lot here. We want something a little bit better. better. It's not really pushing us towards anything. I mean, if we had like a mana crypt, then getting to go land, crypt, signet, turn 1 Wishclaw Talisman, we might actually be able to win pretty early with Talisman for breach, and then just start brain freezing ourselves maybe, or something like that, or just holding up lots of this interaction that we have. I would have to be mulling kind of hard and be in a very scary pod to want to think about keeping a hand off the strength of early access to Mindbreak Trap. This one could be bait as well because we have a fish, but we're going to be playing behind curve pretty much all game, where we're going to have to tap out for fish, it looks like a lot. If we draw anything we can do with 1 mana, it'll be pretty nice. The one bit of saving grace we do have is that we do have the Mindbreak Trap, so we know that we have a bit of free interaction if somebody does go for a win attempt. Of course, it doesn't work if there's just somebody has the nut just turn 2 Thoracle Consult without having to cast a 3rd spell. Being able to hold up the path against certain decks could be nice on turn 2. So this is another one. The earlier in turn order you are, the better the fish gets, but also the more mana you have access to, the better the fish gets. And we don't really have a lot of it here. So this is one I would definitely consider. We would definitely like to see something other than that Final Fortune. And if we had something like a Flusterstorm or like an Esper Sentinel or some kind of way to develop mana, that would definitely be ideal. I'd say some big things you want to avoid when you're picking up Tymna Kraum. Thinking it's a turbo deck just because you see Nas and Dockside. You're really not. Sometimes you can do that, and that's a strength of the list. You have a lot of game plans, but it's kind of hard to force the deck to do the one that you like the most. Sometimes the deck is going to give you access to one of its plans and you need to use that. Another thing that can be really tricky is knowing how to tutor, because you have so many options in this deck. Vampiric Tutor represents an insane amount of variety. I mean, in the same spot, Vampiric Tutor for a wheel, for a Dockside, for a counter spell could all be reasonable options. And figuring out which of those is going to be the best in each scenario is just going to require a lot of playtime. So just a lot of exposure to cEDH. If you're new, this is a very powerful deck, but it can be tricky to pilot to its fullest potential because it is going to be a lot of knowing what is the best card for every scenario, and that requires just a lot of experience. One thing that might keep you from playing this deck is people saying that it's boring or it's just like, oh, just another blue farm player, but don't listen to those people. This is like the de facto cEDH deck right now, and while it's not the most exciting to see at a table, it's not a very spicy brew, very powerful, and it gives you access to all the cool things that you can do in cEDH. You get to make a ton of mana and do very turbo-y plays. You get to go very big brain with a lot of your tutor targets and your breach lines, and knowing what to do in each scenario, and drawing cards is just a lot of fun. You get to do it more than almost any other deck does. You get access to a lot of the very cool things that this format has to offer. Pretty much all of them are here. You get to do it all. If you're excited about the prospect of like creature combos or infinite mana loops or things like that, this isn't the deck for you. But if you just want a deck that you know is stable and strong and gets to do a lot of different things, and where your skill as a pilot is going to really come in clutch, this is absolutely the deck for you. Every time I've played Tymna Kraum, almost every single loss that I've got, it absolutely feels like, oh, I did something wrong, I deserve that loss. Like, it's a deck that feels like if you played perfect, your win rate should be absolutely like in the stratosphere, like 75% or something absurd. I'm not even that good at the game, and I have like a 50% win rate on Tymna Kraum. It can carry you in the sense that you're going to have access to all the best cards, but it requires you to put in the work as well. You need to know how to sequence them, what to look for in any scenario. How to fetch can be really tricky. I would say in general, you want to fetch for lands that give you access to one of each of your commander's colors. Badlands, Underground Sea, Tundra. That's just something to keep in mind. Playing to all of your options is going to be a huge thing for you as you play this deck. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. Let me know down below what you liked about it, what you didn't. If you'd like to see another video like this on a different deck, if you'd like for me to change the structure of this series, this is just something new I'm trying. I like to help people get into the game, and I also need to do it in a way that's a little bit easier for me to edit, and also maybe a little bit more approachable and shows off everything about a list and not just giving it a super presentable, you know, cute, clean edit. So let me know what you think. With all that being said, thank you so much for watching, and as always, go play cEDH. Have a good one, everybody.